And we're back. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech Tech Talks, and time to time we check in with Attila Seress of Cypac, and we're going to do that again today. We're going to catch up on ransomware and AI. Ooh. Okay, Attila, talking to you, I'm already scared. I start getting scared as soon as you come on the screen. So why don't you come on and talk about the developments, that's the wrong word, the negative developments, the scary developments about ransomware, so I can get scared.
Well, Jay, the best part about fear is it also maybe puts us into action, right? Otherwise, we get complacent. And ransomware is one of those things that, people thought that they got it all covered. They got a good backup, they got things figured out. And unfortunately, a new study came out from the FBI, and the FBI every year releases something called the IC3. It's an Internet Crime and Complaint Center's annual, kind of what their numbers look like. What are people reporting to the FBI? How much is it costing them? It's a data report. And on that report, it says, hey, good news. Ransomware payments are down 38%. So that means that these bad guys are losing money. They're not making the same kind of money they used to. But unfortunately,
it seems to mean that. But why do I feel there's a big but?
And that's the big but. Unfortunately, these guys are also pretty smart, and they're highly motivated and well-funded. So now they're getting a little bit more creative about ransomware and how they're going to deploy it. And so they've deployed double extortion and triple extortion tactics. So I'd like to kind of talk about those so we can.
Please. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about what ransomware is. Let's kind of do a review session. So ransomware came out roughly around 2018, and it peppered billboards across Thailand and UK where it locked up public transit systems. And in fact, we saw most recently Colonial Pipeline had a ransomware incident. And what that does is that they take encryption, the same kind of encryption that you have on your credit card, on a smart chip, or even on this video stream, it's probably encrypted. And it takes that encryption and it applies it to all your files on your computer. Right? So far, so good. Everything is encrypted. Without the key, you can't get to your files. And so they put up this fancy message that says, hey, it's a time bomb. You've got 3 days to pay us in Bitcoin. Otherwise, we take all the files and we send a remote wipe and we erase everything. And so businesses got wise. They said, well, if we get ransomware, we certainly don't want our files to get lost, do we? So they put in good backup plans and offsite backup plans and all kinds of other fancy things. And it became kind of a cat and mouse game where bad guys would get inside of your computer network and then disable the backups and then deploy the ransomware. Seen it firsthand. Really sucks. So these bad guys have continued to evolve their tactics. And so now we have double extortion. So they deploy the single extortion tactic, which is ransomware. And so they lock up the files after getting inside by either clicking on an accidental email or going to a website or any number of ways they get in. And after that, they silently, before locking up your files, they take them all away. They all download them over our wonderful high-speed fiber internet connections that we have. Everyone wants to watch Netflix and everything instantly. Well, that requires high bandwidth. Well, that high bandwidth can also be used to exfiltrate or suck away and copy the data away. And they'll let the business know after all the data has been stolen. Well, we're going to lock up your computers and you got to pay us for that. And then we're going to take this data and we're going to leak it out there unless you pay us as well. So they have your data. Now, in some companies, it's not such a big deal, right? Like, let's say you're a florist shop. Who really cares if, who bought who for dinner? And in fact, I'm talking about real breaches here, by the way. So everything from florist shops to vehicle service centers, data breach there as well. Vehicle service centers, who cares when you had an oil change on your car? Big deal, right? But imagine if it's a healthcare provider or if it's a credit card company or a bank. I mean, it's really difficult to change a social security number, your blood type, or your medical history. That kind of stuff, once it gets leaked, pretty bad. So that is a double extortion technique. And then we get to triple extortion. So triple extortion, this is the new stuff.
How does the double extortion? So now they have your stuff, and you didn't pay the ransom, so they're punishing you for failing to pay the ransom, and they leak your important data. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, they leak it or sell it. And up to this point, they were really just thinking about they weren't really digging into the data to find out what was in there that they could even add, do anything to put the pressure on. You got to remember, everything here is designed to put the pressure on the victim to pay. They want money. It's just plain and simple. And any way that they can get it by putting on more and more pressure, that's where the problems happen. Now, here's the problem with with extortion in general. The FBI does not recommend that you pay the ransom. And it is because what's to stop them from demanding more and demanding more, right? And there's some interesting developments happening now with crypto. Up until this point, there was this kind of false perception that Bitcoin was untraceable, which by the definition of the blockchain, you've done plenty of, crypto episodes on ThinkTech. I'm sure you've gone over blockchain. You could probably put a link to that in our show notes. But the idea is that blockchain technology is public. That's the whole point. And there are ways where they can start connecting the dots and figure out in their investigations where this money's ending up. So the idea of paying an untraceable Bitcoin, it's not so untraceable as it used to be. So, so we're talking about double extortion here, right? They get in, they smash and grab your systems, smash and grab your files. They want money to get them back. Triple extortion and reputation damage, that's where it gets really interesting. So when it comes to triple extortion, they can do the first two, right? Steal the data, hold the data hostage and threaten to release it, but they can also attack the network. So we've seen this on major retailers. This is where it becomes a problem. They can flood the public sites with so much data that the sites can't respond. We saw something similar to this with Hawaiian Airlines a few months back. We've seen this, I believe, with Burberry and a few other big e-commerce retailers.
Is that like denial of service?
Exactly. It's a DDoS attack. And here's what's insidious about it. This is fun. So there are, what's the best way to put it? Kind of like an outsourced, like let's say you want to DDoS a company, like a bank. Well, it's really hard to kind of take over maybe 3,000 or 4,000 computers to coordinate an attack like this, where they can all flood a single place with packets. So the bad guys have found ways to take over a few thousand computer networks and then sell access by the minute. They say, hey, look, you want to flood this place? No problem. 15 minutes. Great. Let's do it. Pay us and press a button and off it goes. So it's been completely commoditized. And in those DDoS
you have to pay to use your own system. It's like a special subscription to use your own system.
Yeah, think of it like DoorDash for for attacking your victims, right? Like, why bother going down to the local eatery and picking up the food yourself? You can just go on there with an app and someone will take care of it for you.
They get to be your partner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it becomes denial of service as a service, really. DDoS as a service.
Well, you said at the outset that the stats were down, but that didn't that didn't resolve the problem. But it sounds like when you have these three levels of attack, the stats of damage and ransom are up. No, how do you reconcile those stats?
Sure thing. So this kind of the triple attack that I'm describing here, this is the new playbook for 2023. We haven't really seen this last year. This is all the new stuff they're doing. And in these, for example, with these denial service attacks, this is how insidious they are. They throw packets. Think of them like basketballs. They throw packets at a at a airline's website, so people can't, book airplane tickets, or they throw it in an e-commerce site, so it essentially grinds their sales to a halt. But inside each of those packets, each of those basketballs, if they were to open them up, which forensics guys do, they'll see a little note, and in that note, it'll say, "Hey, we're attacking you. Here's what you pay and where to send the money for us to stop."
Well,
Wow.
if blockchain isn't available anymore, where do you send the money?
It is available, and it's still what they use. So, there's no way you can like write a cashier's check and send it out. But
So help me rectify the
sure.
fact that the stats of attacks are down, but there's 3 levels of ransomware, and so something maybe up. What is the connection?
Well, that's kind of the history. So every year it's been going up. The until last year when it went down about 38%, because everyone got wise, right? Business owners decided to put together a business continuity plan, backup plans, moved a lot of stuff to the cloud. They said, we're not going to store this stuff on site anymore. It's too vulnerable. And so because of that, last year payments were down. And these guys are organized crime. Organized crime means that they have quotas, they have KPIs and metrics. These guys need to make their money from victims. They need to attack networks, find a way to do it. So they're getting really creative. So I suspect that based on these new strategies, and we haven't even gone through all of them yet, based on these new strategies, numbers are going to be way up this year because they're getting mean. Like these are really mean strategies.
Just so they're reacting to the reduction last year by tuning up their systems to be more destructive this year.
Correct. Exactly.
Wow. So, gee whiz. I want to talk for a minute about the Colonial Pipeline affair, which you and I talked about. We touched on that a few months ago. In that case, the FBI was happy to report that they had gotten some of the ransom back, but not all of it. And I really wonder what happened there, because I'm not convinced that demonstrates that the FBI knows in full how to deal with this. What happened?
From what I remember, they were able to retrieve some of it by going back through the public ledger, as I described. That's how they were able to point out exactly what happened, like where that money went. And it went to a group. The name escapes me just this minute, but it went to a Russian hacking group.
Why am I not surprised?
Well, exactly. Now, here's the funny part. This is maybe 6 months ago, something like that. That same group was arrested by Russian authorities. And that same group then was put to work using similar attack patterns out in the wild against other critical infrastructure projects in the Ukraine. So the question remains, like, the official release was, hey, look, the U.S., we did you guys a favor. These are the bad guys that took down Colonial Pipeline. Russia has nothing to do with this, so we're arresting them, because it's the right thing to do. But then isn't it interesting that those same attack patterns that, were able to infiltrate Colonial Pipeline then are being used against Ukraine? So
really
maybe
wonder, though. There's always the possibility of propaganda. By the way, the group was called Dark Side.
Dark Side, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many of them, and they're funny too.
Well, let's get to the big question. We have a few minutes left. We're about halfway through our discussion, and the big question is, United States has a lot of very sophisticated computer programmers and telecommunications guys and switch guys, if you will, who can monitor what's going in and out through the internet. They're not only in Silicon Valley these days, they're in other places too, like New York. Why can't we also up the ante? Why don't we see prosecutions on this? It's interesting that I guess it was some group that was involved in a mass murder within the last couple of days was tried and sentenced for some extraordinary number of lifetimes, hundreds of years in jail. I guess it wasn't a death sentence, but it was multiple lifetimes. I said to myself, that's interesting because we have seen so many of them get off the hook. And then I thought of white collar crime, where a lot of these guys get off the hook. For one reason or another, it's not treated as all that serious. And the judge and the jury will say, it's white collar crime. Let's give them a few months or a couple of years in jail. I want to volunteer for you, Attila, to be on that jury, because I treat this stuff as really, really serious and really destructive. And I think the justice system doesn't. And I think what should happen here is when you catch somebody, you lay into them with a major sentence for a lifetime. Unfortunately, that's neither the law nor the fact. But I wonder, you don't hear about any prosecutions. If you called up the Attorney General of the state of Hawaii and you asked him, how many prosecutions have you done for ransomware? You get a big fat zero. And so I think the FBI is close to that. But why can't we catch them?
Well, Jay, there's different degrees of crime. In my opinion, there are some crimes that they're financially motivated, and in the end, no one really gets physically hurt. There a lot of these companies, such as Colonial Pipeline. Yeah, it costs them a few $1 million and a lot of issues with PR and etc. And in that case, I mean, it was a big inconvenience, right? They were unable to deliver jet fuel. It was
how about the hospitals? How about the hospitals that have been subjected to ransomware? I mean, people probably got sicker or died because of the ransomware and the time factor. Would you consider that more serious?
Yeah, so far there's only been one confirmed death due to this, and that was in Europe. This was a couple of years ago, specifically with a hospital ransomware. And during COVID time, like hospitals were kind of off limits for hackers. Now it's back. They're after them just the same. But the there's a lot of cybercrime out there that's probably not appropriate for this show to talk about, where there are really people being harmed by them, and that's the focus of these investigations. When they involve children, when they involve drugs, when they involve people's lives being in danger, that's where the real focus goes. All of us here, talking about this, ransomware and computer being locked up. That's the real kind of happy side of cybercrime, and I like to stay there because it's kind of depressing, the other side. But just know that they're doing their best to really get the deep and dark evil bad guys and put them into prison, and they do catch those guys. That's what the focus.
Why don't we hear about it? Why don't we hear about a prosecution and a sentence?
If you like, I can send you some links. They do occur. Probably one of the more famous ones was the arrest of an individual who ran Silk Road. That was a drugs, assassination, human trafficking website on the dark web. Since then, a dozen more have popped up. There have been more arrests, coordinated arrests all around the world for this. Those are the guys they're really after. What we're really focusing on is how do we minimize business interruptions so that you can go on with your happy life. That's the end of it.
Well, my life will become less and less happy as these guys get more sophisticated, and I think it's a real challenge. We have seen, for example, in the political arena, we have seen, the media tell us that the Justice Department, the FBI is investigating, and it takes a while. And it's lining up a prosecution takes a while. So far, in certain cases, it's taken years and years when we all saw what happened on television. Okay, so that's one phenomenon of the times in which we live. The other phenomenon is the phenomenon in Congress, where Congress, here's these people that testify about tech issues, social media issues, and they don't understand. There's nobody in the room that understands. They can't even frame up a question to a tech CEO. The tech CEOs have to be, sympathetic to them to try to dumb it down to grade school level so that Congress understands. So I see two factors, stand in the way of immediate, justice delayed is justice denied, right? I see two factors. One is they don't the investigative and prosecutorial authorities don't understand. For that matter, the lawmakers don't understand. And the other, of course, is that it takes a long time under our justice system to make that investigation, even longer if you don't understand, and to actually hit home on it. And I wonder if, and that's really not sustainable, because this is getting worse and it's getting more threatening to business and to individuals. What can we do? And here's the second major question I'm going to ask you. What about AI? AI is what, 6 or 7 months old, at least in the public sphere. AI should be able to, I'm sure that the organized crime guys are using it or want to use it or have plans to use it. But what about the rest of us? Can't we use AI to defend ourselves?
Well, you have a couple questions there. I can guarantee you right now, each of us right now in our inbox have email messages that have been generated by AI, positively. It's out there. So, it's been out for some time. And kind of like on these newer forms of attacks, like, for example, like these ransomware groups, what they do is they're taking some of that exfiltrated data and they're reaching out to clients. So like you would be a customer, and then they put the pressure on the customers, making the company look bad. So they'll reach out to you and say, for example, hey, we've locked up Netflix's infrastructure and they're refusing to pay. Those are bad. That's a bad company. You should put pressure on them as a customer of theirs. But let's go back to like what you can actually do about some of this. Now, the biggest attack vector we see, and I hate to say it, is poor cyber hygiene. And it's not just like, hey, I got two-factor authentication. Because by the way, if you do, two-factor authentication protects you like 100 times better than if you didn't have it. Yes, there are ways around two-factor, but for the majority of folks out there who are going to be listening to this, or hopefully listening to this, two-factor authentication, getting that multi-factor QR code based, right, with the Rotator app, not just the text message, that's the best type of two-factor. But also, so what we see is this. A company has a CFO and they have, let's say, a bunch of engineers. And those architects and engineers are in operations. CFO is doing money stuff, right? CFO gets an email, clicks on the email, installs something on her computer. And that computer then looks around and sees what she has access to. They say, well, let's see, we have some QuickBooks files here. And then it reaches out to the operations. And it sees that there's all these wonderful engineering diagrams of, I don't know, let's say the rail or electric grid or sewer system. And it says, wow, this is some really interesting data. How about I, steal all that and then lock it up and go through this whole process? What do you see the problem with what occurred here? The CFO should not have had access to the operations, engineering, and architectural files. This is called least privilege. And least privilege is something that's just so overlooked in the everyday working operations. Folks only need access to what they need to do their job. And when there is an infection,
need to know existed from the early part of the 20th century.
So start there. Anyone listening should start really there. What are the effective permission structures that you have inside your organizations to the files that you need to do your job? I was just reading about a breach just earlier today, and that's exactly what they had done. They had air gapped different parts of their network. So when a bad guy did get into them, they just got into the sales database. So it was like a few emails and stuff. They couldn't actually penetrate into the main architecture of their network. Because if they had, then a lot of customers would have been down. So that's what you want to do, is really think about how you architect access and who has access to what inside of your company. Because if everyone has access to everything, it only takes one bad move to destroy the entire company.
It reminds me of a submarine with watertight compartments. So if one floods, the other doesn't. And I think that's the concept here. The other thing I want to mention to you and see your reaction. Just today, I got an email about the Ukrainians. They are very smart on computers. And I'm not sure if that's intrinsic or they have help from elsewhere. But what they were apparently able to do, and this is actually amusing. They were able to reach the wife of a Russian pilot by email, and using various what do you want to call it, psychological gambits on the email. With her, they organized a party of all the Russian wives of the pilots in Russia who were attacking Ukraine, and they used facial recognition from that party to identify all the pilots. and now they created their own intelligence through this, this breach in the wives of the pilots. It's really smart and amusing, but it's heavyweight intelligence too. And that facial recognition is probably AI, and some of the stuff they were doing in order to achieve this project was likewise AI. And I'll tell you, one of our software vendors is from Kyiv, and we hold on to that vendor because we want to support Kyiv. But the reality is they're pretty sharp. And so my point to you is that, one good programmer or one cell of programmers appropriately trained and motivated can do enormous good or enormous destruction. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. The argument I've heard about AI, which is interesting, is that everyone's seen the Terminator movies where AI comes to a certain point where it decides that humanity is no longer needed, right? And I don't know how many movies have been made about this same theme, I, Robot, and all these. So the idea is that you have an AI that you think is going to, on its own, decide that we're no longer necessary. When in truth, AI just does what we tell it to do. And the destruction that we're going to do to ourselves through AI will be far greater than anything that the AI could do to us. Us pointing AI at each other as weapons and using it, as you just described, as methods to break inside of networks, to get inside of things. In fact, there's new things now that are occurring where the AI is being pushed to the limit where it can now hack software. So they were able to successfully generate license keys for like a Windows 95 activation by decoding its algorithm. So these things are starting to occur where password hacking, getting inside of networks, creating software that can break inside of other devices on the network on the fly. All these are things that are already being tested with AI. And we're only on version, ChatGPT 4. I mean, wait till we get to ChatGPT 10.
5.1.
Oh, 5.1's out now? Wow.
Wait, no, I'm sorry. That's Mid-Journey is 5.1.
Oh, well, what happens, 2 years from now? We're on a much more advanced version. And where do you set up the guardrails? And, how do you stop someone from picking up their own AI, self-hosting it, and taking the guardrails off and letting it do whatever it wants to do?
Well, we do have a couple of minutes, and I would like to spend them with you now that we're on AI. There's a fellow named Sam Altman who testified in Congress a few days ago, and he is the progenitor of open air AI.
Open AI,
yeah, and quite remarkable. What he said to Congress was, "You need to regulate us because we are dangerous." And I say to myself, well, does Congress understand enough to regulate anybody about this? This is very sophisticated stuff. The people who invented it, the people who are developing it, and taking it to the next level are very sophisticated, smart guys, whether they finished Harvard or not. And the problem that I see is that how exactly do you regulate it? What do? You give licenses? Boy, that would be a First Amendment issue, wouldn't it? What do you do to control the dark side of AI? Any thoughts?
What's interesting about regulation? I was listening to another podcast, and they were talking about COVID-19 and smallpox and horsepox. these are all really terrifying diseases where the gene sequencing is available, like on the internet. And what used to take, millions of dollars and a highly skilled group of people can now be done with some graduate students for 20 grand. So who's to stop any nation state or private company from weaponizing a version of COVID-19, right? Or bringing back, the plague or some awful, genetic thing that could hurt us. And here's my point behind bringing this up is that is not illegal. You could generate your own disease and release if it's released, it's bad, but you could make your own, and that is not illegal, and that should be highly regulated. And that's something that has got decades of information and billions of dollars in science behind it, major corporate interests. That's not regulated. How are you going to regulate AI?
That's my question, and it's Congress's question too. I hope they take him seriously. This guy Sam Altman of Open Air AI. But
yeah.
the other thing that came up that is very, very interesting this week in the paper is that some AI developer in one of the big tech companies, that I forget which one, said that he had come to believe that AI could be made sentient. And, we've seen articles along that line over the past few months about AI expressing feelings. I'm angry at you, Attila. You have provoked my anger. And where did that come from? This is like out of Space Odyssey 2001. I can't do that for you, Hal. And so you have actual scientist people, engineer people in the AI realm saying they believe that AI is sentient now, depending on what the form is, or it will become capable of becoming sentient. And that is as scary as it gets, isn't it?
Could be. I mean, the Turing test is really, that's where that comes about. I mean, Alan Turing created this test in the 70s or 80s where, or maybe it was 60s. I don't know. It was somewhere mid-century. And the Turing test looks at a computer program and says, can we fool someone into believing that this is a real person for 3 minutes or more? Right. And when it comes to AI, I mean, yes, it is very convincing, but we're also a more savvy society now than we've ever been. So it is hard to tell whether it is sentient or not. But I mean, you're going back to a philosophical question that's thousands of years old. We're talking about Sartre. How do you know that you are a thinking being? How do you know this is not a dream? I don't know. But I can tell you this, that AI is only going to be as smart as we train it to be. So if we put it in front of a lot of people with a lot of negative intent, then it will become a negatively behaving AI. If we put it in front of a positive group of people and ask it to do really creative things, it will continue to do that even better. So it is a learning machine. This is a machine learning device. This is not we're building consciousness here. And in the end, it could be the smartest machine in the room and capable of giving the best answers, but it may not have the true emotion that we all have as human beings.
Well, we'll see. I mean, this moving so fast. We'll have further discussion on that issue even in the next few months. Then we'll hear various sides of the question, and who knows where it goes. But I suggest to you that the good guys and the bad guys will both be able to get their hands on it. One of the big tech companies that is playing with AI gave away their code recently. I'm not sure why they did that. That just asks for trouble. On the other, and it's also, it's against their own economic self-interest to do that. But I suppose they had a reason for it. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, there's a number of them out there. I know one of them that was accidentally leaked was Facebook's version, and there are
Right, Facebook,
self-hosted versions out in the wild, and they are being trained. However, their operators deem them to be trained, but they can train them to attack networks, so they can train them to defend them. There's the training is where it comes in, Now, ChatGPT has become so popular because lots of people used it. It got really well trained. And so each successive version has gotten better and better at generating content.
Well, a small thing, a small thing. I have to write a lot for ThinkTech. I have to write text, and I thought I could write. I thought I could write, but lately I take my writing and I make my writing as good as it can possibly as I can possibly make it. I use the right words, grammatically and all that, and then I feed it into ChatGPT, and I say rewrite this for me or summarize this for me, and it does instantly. And you know what, Attila? It's always better. I can never do as well.
So here's the problem with that. If you put that on a blog, now the search engines have the ability to detect whether the content was created by ChatGPT or not, or any sort of AI. And so it's a probability scale. But if you're hitting like 95% probability that whatever you just created has been, augmented by AI, your SEO goes way down. The folks that are going to be coming to ThinkTech are going to be bots, not real people. So on our blog, for instance, it's all not written by ChatGPT. It's fine. I have a couple typos in there every once in a while. It's a real person. It's me writing them all. These weekly emails that you read from me. So there's some value in that. I think there's going to become a divide at some point where there may be some pride in having something that's completely human generated, because having things not be human generated, computer generated, might just be not the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is fascinating, and we know that Attila, you and me, we're going to have further discussion about this.
I'm going to leave you with one thought, though.
Okay, go.
This just came out last week. The industry that's going to be most affected by AI is legal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Most effective.
Let me offer a thought that I've had since this came up. So you have one AI lawyer writing one side of the case. You have another AI lawyer writing the other side of the case. And you have a third AI judge who writes